I'd like to welcome everyone to the rescheduled week 2 of February Flare-Up Fire Intelligence. Today, we will be hearing about efforts across the pond to support wildfire suppression, restoration, and prevention by advancing analysis tools. We will have some time at the end of the session for questions. I'm happy to welcome Daan, our speaker for today. Daan is working to provide accessible, scalable, and cost-effective solutions to empower wildfire managers with the tools they need. I'm looking forward to hearing about how better access to data can lead to smarter, faster, and more coordinated wildfire response across Europe and how that can translate to North America. Welcome, Daan. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you for this invite. And indeed, super nice to be speaking to you all across the pond. I know some people in the Canadian wildfire space. We at Wildflyer are interacting a lot and learning a lot from like multiple agencies in your country. So I think, yeah, your country is really a leader for European agencies. So it's an honor to be sending a little bit of information back into your direction. Yeah, so today I will share a little bit about like our perspective on wildfire analysis in Europe. We are not a government agency. We are a young startup. We just started over 1 year ago. So I'll share a little bit about like what my current perspective of wildfire analysis in Europe is, and so what our startup is trying to contribute to this space. So first thing you'll notice is Europe consists of countries. And if you actually look at these countries, they consist of many fine, many sort of levels of government. And this is sort of my biggest observation about wildfire analysis and just wildfire suppression in general in Europe is that it's super fragmented. Wheels are unfortunately being invented in multiple places at the same time. So some redundancy is of course useful, but yeah, in general, we just see that most efforts in the wildfire analysis space are conducted on the level that you see here. So this is Spain. We're in very good contact with, for example, the firefighting services in Catalonia or in Valencia or in Andalusia. And just to give you one example, if you go to Valencia, they just rolled out a super impressive system to analyze live fuel moisture content. So that's the humidity of live fuel, and specifically rosemary. And they do it with super advanced technology, new system, but it only works for Valencia. Like if you go 10 kilometers across the border, the maps aren't produced there. And like I have huge respect for the team in Valencia, and I consider myself friends with them. But if you ask them like, hey, could this be used in Extremadura? That's just not on their agenda. And so what you typically see in a province like Valencia is like if you can enter a office that sits full of people with PhDs and in operation. And so their job is to provide all of these wildfire analysis capabilities to the province. And if you go to maybe another country, for example, like Germany, this is what that same room would look like. So many countries, or I would say most countries, don't have dedicated wildfire analysis units. And at the same time, sort of, I don't know whether it's due to climate change or whatever reasons you may want to fill in the blank there, we do see sort of wildfires are increasing. And fortunately, what we also see when we travel through Europe, we do see that people are becoming a lot more interested in doing wildfire analysis. They're starting, like the knowledge is really starting to spread that, for example, in my country, in the Netherlands, that, hey, maybe it's not a good first step to start buying like a fixed wing aircraft for fire suppression, maybe it's a lot more effective to sort of build capacity through wildfire analysis as one of the many steps that need to be taken. And so the benefits of wildfire analysis are more and more heard through Europe. So before a fire, it's like if you do your wildfire analysis before a fire well, that can lead to much more cost-effective deployment. You can look at, hey, where should we apply prevention strategies? You can inform the public and stakeholders. And then during a fire, obviously, like if you send resources in the right place, they can be, 2 times or 10 times more effective than a resources just working in the wrong place. And of course, one of the most important parts of wildfire analysis is just keeping people in operation and the public safe during a wildfire. So what we see in Europe is that there is a lot of international cooperation. We see, for example, people going from my country, the Netherlands, they go to international courses in Spain or in Italy, where at that level, there is amazing interaction. So how that process usually starts is there might be someone in the firefighting service here or in civil protection, and he thinks, okay, we need to get this done. Like we should get wildfire analysis operational in our region. Typically, the first thing that person needs to do is just a whole lot of convincing. I am very curious, like what your backgrounds all are, but I'm assuming that many of you are in public service. So yes, there's a whole lot of politics that gets involved with that. So if you want to get wildfire analysis on the agenda, on the budget, you will first have to work for quite a while on getting your boss to buy you a ticket to Italy or Spain. If you do manage to go past that hurdle, the next step is you take the training. And then what happens is you come back and all those tools that maybe they have in Spain or Italy, you don't have. And that's where we come in. So what we see happening today is someone comes back from Italy, talks to his or her boss again, like, hey, how was it? Okay, yes, we can do this and that and that. And then they need to start building the tools. And what we see today is like I mentioned earlier, these tools are in this very local context. They are not portable from Spain to the Netherlands. So a long process of like 1 to 3 years begins like, hey, maybe we need to build this dashboard. Maybe somebody needs to fill this task. And if you look at it, and this is how our company started, is with this very specific task, is like this one of the many tasks of a wildfire analyst is just making the fire risk forecasts. I know that your country is quite amazing in that. I mean, we are using the Canadian Fire Weather Index throughout Europe. So one of the main tasks of a wildfire analyst coming back from Italy or Spain would be making these reports. And what that looks like today, that's been our observation, is like whether you go from the south of France to Norway or to Germany, is that it's a process of just knowing which 40 websites you need to go to, and then copy pasting a lot of information to Excel, and then copy pasting that into PowerPoint. So we do have some European systems like the European Forest, the EFIS. Some of you might have heard of it. And if you're a pro user, for example, if you're in Spain, then some of this data you might be able to automate yourself. You might be able to get into your own tools or maybe into ArcGIS. But this is a problem. Like what we saw throughout Europe was like high-ranking officers who during the fire season need to spend, like 7 hours each week just sort of copy pasting things and then maybe having 10 minutes left for doing the actual analysis. And so this is where our company jumped in is like, hey, maybe this is something that we can help you with. Like, we are not going to tell you how you should do your analysis. We're not going to come up with some sort of AI algorithm that predicts which fire happens where. We just look at your existing workflows and we try to streamline them. So you don't have to spend 8 hours on Monday, but you can just spend 20 minutes doing the analysis, and your report is faster, and we believe eventually it will become a lot better. So after a couple of months, we had a first version running. We're now about 1 year since we went live. So we just built up a very, at the beginning, it was just a very simple product that does that. Like, hey, okay, you need, we talked to people throughout Europe. We asked, which data do you need for your reports? So we now have over 40 different weather agencies connected. And with that, we now have around 70 different weather models. So people need, high definition data for what's going to happen today. They need ensemble models for what's going to happen maybe 3, 4, 5 days from now. One thing that people weren't asking for, but are now extremely happy with, is a reanalysis weather models. Is to be able to look at, like, the 100 fires that took place in your district. What were the weather circumstances during all of those fires? I think that's something that, going to just public websites isn't going to get you there. We also combine a lot of weather stations. And now we're also offering mobile weather stations, radio sondes. We're also integrating remote sensing data. And still, we're not inventing how to do fire analysis. We're just streamlining the process. And what sits on the other end of all that data aggregation is just an app, works on in your browser, on your phone. People have it in fire stations where just the output of that report can be displayed. We also have an API. So if you are using ArcGIS, you can just render our maps in sort of the tools that you're already used to. And yeah, so the result of that is that the people that we now work with, so we're now working with 8 agencies in Europe, is we help really push down the amount of time they had to spend for each report. So this wasn't updated yet. So we just signed 2 last week. Like I already mentioned before, this reanalysis data is something that's super interesting. So with remote sensing, we've analyzed 85,000 burn scars in Europe since the start of the Sentinel missions. And being able to combine, like, we see sort of, with data that, like, every layer you add is not a plus, but it's a multiple. Like, the value of having all that data together is amazing. And so one of the things that our platform does quite well, I would say, is we've really simplified how we can write fire indices or in general weather indices. So for example, your country just had a update on the fire weather index system, and it's relatively easy for us to just put that code into in these weather streams that we're getting in, and then something we don't have yet, but that's on the agenda for this summer, is that we want to really help agencies help them understand which fire indices work in their context. Sometimes I'm just quite surprised or baffled that everybody in Europe is just using the fire weather index. And then they try to sort of localize it by just, setting the thresholds for the different risk levels. We think and we believe that Europe and maybe the world can do a lot better. And this might be one way. Like, if you combine sort of which incidents do we have in our system, if we have all the weather data, then maybe we can just find out by easily changing which indices are in our reports, see the fit basically between burnt area or damage done. So that's what we're building is a overview of, okay, which fires were there and what, like if we now write fire index, how does a fire index perform for these past fires? Sorry, this was the slide for this part of the story. API. We see our users are already integrating the API into, for example, ArcGIS, especially our map layers. Again, like if there's a new fire index, you can write it in our system. You can make a map in ArcGIS by adding your index to our system. And so what's the future of our platform? So we'd like to go beyond this remote sensing and meteo analysis. We are aiming to become the industry's first marketplace. I know that in Canada, you also have a wonderful startup called MapNova. We are in good contact with them. Really appreciate their work. Not sure who started writing the first line of code and whether we actually can bear the words first marketplace or whether they can, but I know that they are on a very similar path. Because what we both see is it's difficult for public agencies, maybe less in Canada than here. I don't know why, but you guys seem to have this organized quite well. But it's just difficult to manage all these digital projects. So if there's a department here that might be interested in, like, hey, could we also, for example, do something with drones, after a fire, make a high definition map, then how do we integrate all that into like something that everybody can use without having to train 100 people again and again for every extra screen or extra window that pops up. And we believe that a marketplace where software and hardware vendors can basically plug and play their tools into our platform. And then we believe that's going to make innovation a lot easier and faster for operational agencies. Yeah, so one thing about sort of our value, like one of our values is we're never a replacement for humans. We see a lot of competitors out there who are trying to build AI-based systems that basically just eclipse the people who are now doing this work. And we really believe that a system like this is never, like, it should never be a decision-making tool. It should just be something that super experienced, well-trained people can use to get an extra set of senses. Another value and also a legal thing about our company is that we're steward owned. That's something that maybe in Canada people are not yet super familiar with. But it basically just means that, yes, we are for profit, but we are legally bound that all that profit needs to be going towards our mission. So yes, we do have shareholders, but they have sort of a very limited say in our company. And we believe that, because we're in this sector, profit is great to sort of grow, but it should really go towards our mission. Yeah, after Mr. Trump, we quickly moved all of our data away from US-based servers. So that's something that our clients here in Europe really appreciate. It's all in French hands now. And yeah, let me just pause at that. I think I prefer to sort of any further information. We can do this through Q&A. So I know maybe some of you have already asked some questions in the chat, but I'm really like, if you do have a question, I would love to sort of maybe hear it from you personally, if that's possible.
Thanks, Dan. That's great. So as Dan said, if you're comfortable, you're welcome to raise your hand and then you can ask your question in person. Just let you know that does mean you are going to be a part of the recording. If you'd like to ask your question anonymously, post it in the chat box and I'll read it out on your behalf. While we wait for some questions to come in, I have a few here that I will start with. So I like that you touched on AI versus human intelligence. And to take us back all the way to the start of February, we had Neil from the BC Wildfire Service as our first speaker of February Flare-Up Fire Intelligence. And he talked a fair amount about AI, and a lot of people see it as a panacea or a silver bullet, but that really human intelligence is at the heart of wildfire management and decision making. And I was wondering, do you see in Europe a similar perspective with that, or a push to use more AI tools that maybe aren't fully understood or integrated? And how do you handle that?
Lovely question. Sort of in the fire services, I have heard of no one sort of who's interested in just like, hey, let's use this panacea system. I think sort of using our system can already feel a little bit far-fetched and sort of so yeah, my sense is that if people in operations don't really understand how a system works, and if they cannot like peel back on the layers of that system and see what's actually going on inside, my current intuition is that people are not going to be interested in adopting that system. But I'm also just one person, and maybe 1 year from now things are going to sort of advance so crazy that but I kind of look in the future.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think we see that here too. A lot of the people that work in wildfire management are boots on the grounds people, and they're rooted in the real world, right? So, and their file folders of experience are real world experiences. So knowing that they need to be able to see what's under the hood and how it works is probably of a great benefit to your company there.
Yeah.
So when you talked about simplified fire weather indices in Europe, I was curious, and you talked about how it can be a bit baffling that FWI is used broadly across Europe when it doesn't necessarily fit the context, the ecosystems, for what it was built. This is probably not a fair question, but do you have a suggestion further than it needs to be a regional approach? Or if you were asked how to integrate better systems throughout Europe, what would your kind of short recommendation be to tackle that problem?
Yeah, so if people would start using our system, I would really recommend first you just do the way it's always been done. Like that's, but just do that while saving time. And then going from there, what I think is really necessary is that agencies can start sort of between brackets, like start playing around with indices. And I see a major hurdle here now is that like, hey, maybe the hot, dry, windy index would be sort of a very highly skilled indicator for our region. But how do you know whether it's skilled in your region if you sort of don't have access to that kind of data? So the way it works now is, okay, I have to go to my national forecasting agencies, like, hey, can you set up a dashboard? And then you have this data, and then you can sort of start working back. But this process can easily take like a year or something, like cross agency, getting a project set up. So I think that's one of the main things is like, hey, let's just like, so in our tool, you can just sort of literally, hey, let's add the hot, dry, windy index to our fire report for the next couple of weeks with sort of a experimental above it. Or you as an analyst can just sort of click 20 fires in your area that took place and look how that indicator behaved. So I feel that step of just being able to experiment freely is super critical for innovation. And then having said that, of course, there's just also just science there to help is there's 30 indicators in the system, there's 200 fires in the system. and of this fire. Well, we currently know sort of a little bit the fire behavior and the but mostly just how like the burn scar size. So you can just do very basic statistical analysis of, hey, which indicators in my region really work. Like, and that's something like maybe you have the same in Canada, but here we have, even within France, like if you go to the southeast of France, almost always wind-driven fires. So if there's no wind, like there's not been a single huge fire without wind. But on the west side of France, like every big fire was on a day without wind, because there the fires are sort of biomass and sort of vertical stability driven, like convection driven. So it's super important for these regions to start to understand, like, hey, when should my map actually be read, and when should we be requesting for those Canadairs? Yeah.
Thank you. Which I have a question in the chat, but I'm going to ask a follow-up to this first, which takes me to when you talked about reanalysis and the benefits of using the reanalysis data and being able to look back at what's happened in the past. So is there capabilities built into your tool to validate? So like you can throw in hot, dry, windy as an experimental indice, but is there a built-in capability to go back and validate or test its efficacy? Or would that be something that you could help the different agencies with post-season to look back to validate those metrics?
Yeah, no, I mean, reanalysis data is in there all the way back to 1940, based on Arrow 5, 25-kilometer grid scale. So you can like instantly click any index, you can write a new index, and you can go back to all these incidents that we have in the system, and like it instantly shows you like hour by hour how that if you have an hourly index, like how that index behaved during that fire. And the same goes for weather, for observation data. So you can go back to sort of, okay, yeah, so Arrow 5 and as far as your weather stations go back.
So if I'm understanding right, the tool allows you to go back, select which indices or metrics you would like to pull or apply.
Yeah.
But then if you wanted to do an analysis or a ranking of those indices, that would be something that would be outside of the tool.
No, that's all in the tool.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question. And so someone's asking if you have a demo of your tools, and I would add on to that. If so, how would someone be able to access a demo?
Super happy to give anyone a demo. Just I'm not going to do it live during the session. I am just always jinxed with, like, if I do live demos during a session, things tend to sort of go wrong. I'm super happy to schedule a demo with anyone who's interested afterwards.
Perfect. What I can do is I can ask anyone who is interested. You can either reach out to us, or Dan, if you want to put your email in the chat, feel free to do that. People can reach out to you directly. And if it turns out that there's like a group that's from Canada that's interested, we'd be happy to facilitate a platform for that as well.
Yeah, I would actually be super interested in sort of asking, like, this tool set. Like I'm in contact with a couple of really cool people in the wildfire space in Canada. So I have an idea of the capabilities that your country has, but I would be curious to maybe hear from whether it's you or maybe anyone else in the audience. Like, is this some, like, all are these capabilities covered by government tools? Because I have the idea that, like, Canada basically has a lot of this already. And so that's also one of the reasons why we aren't super active in the Canada space yet.
Yeah, if any of the participants want to throw in their 2 cents, you can either unmute and share the perspective from your perspective agencies, or throw it in the chat. I think my simplified response would be that yes, but it varies. So there are some places in Canada that have huge capacity and departments dedicated to things like predictive services, and there are some places that it might be one person, or they might do it on contract. So as you know, we're a large geographic area and very spaced out, and the population centers also tend to be more to the south, and places with more people tend to get more attention and more resources when it comes to wildfires. So that would be my simplified answer to that. But if anyone else wants to chime in, feel free to. There is also like the WIPS, the Wildfire Intelligence and Predictive Services Program, which is relatively new unit within the Canadian Forest Service. I know you know Brett Moore, who's heading that. They are providing kind of a national support for some of this, or at least hoping to build that into their program capacity. So
Right.
anyone here from Canada that doesn't know about WIPS, it's definitely worth looking it up. So I have a comment in the question or in the chat. I'm just going to read out here. So this person acknowledges they're novice in the field and primarily have been interested because this is an issue we all have to care about. There's a great connection with the weather data and indices. Are you able to speak a little bit about this? What kind of challenges were there? How easy was it from a technology perspective to get this integrated?
So I think Raj, if I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Raj. You're asking about the connection between weather data, indices, and fires. I think that maybe is that your question?
I believe Raj is asking.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right. Just in general, yeah, what, the tool, from my understanding, brings together uh, the fire data and the weather data, create some indices and some visualization to allow you to understand the relationship between these two primarily. So was that
Yeah.
significantly, in this world of great technology solutions and integration, how much of an issue was that?
So to build it, yeah, I mean, it did take us a year to sort of properly build it. So it was not easy. In Europe, all weather agencies are Europe mandated to publish all of their forecasts online. But the way they have to publish it is not mandated. There are standards on this, but it's not easy to homogenize all this data that's being put out by all these different agencies. So that was a huge part of that work. And then same goes for getting all those burn scars in our system. So it was not trivial. I also would say it's not the most difficult thing to do ever. Like it's not building I don't know, Aurora Tech, they're building satellites. I'm sure that's technically a lot more difficult than what we're doing. And yeah, I see that because like our customers are sort of being able to see those two things together is something that they've never seen before. Before this, they would literally just have to get a postdoc or a PhD student to analyze like fire by fire, like what happened, and just being able to click on a fire and then seeing, oh, this is what happened. That's new. I hope I answered your question a bit.
Yes, you did. Thanks very much, Dan. That was very good. Thank you.
thanks. And it's quite impressive. I'm with Raj in that, to me, thinking of the amount of work going in behind the scenes in the programming to be able to have it so you can just click and look at all that data seems insurmountable to my simple technology brain. But so it's quite impressive that it's so well integrated. There was a question here about whether or not your tools cover areas other than North America and Europe, for example, China or Korea. And I'll add to that question and say, if not, how easy would it be to integrate?
Yeah, we already have weather models from Canada, US, China, and Japan. We don't have the National Forecasting Agency of Korea, but if a client would be interested in that, it would be like by now quite straightforward to just like if the South Korean, assuming we're talking about South Korea, if the South Korean meteorological agency does publish their forecast online, we can integrate them.
Thanks, Dan.
So
I know
China and Japan are on there already.
Perfect. Yeah, I know I saw quite a few of your forecasts popping up in my LinkedIn feed over the summer for California, kind of sending well wishes and messages of hope with weather changes coming in. So it was neat to see the tool being used in North America this year or in 2024 operationally. Okay,
Thanks.
so what did you learn from analyzing the 80,000 or 85,000 burn scars, and how did you use or apply your learning? That's the next question.
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful question as well. What did I learn? Yeah, I think I said it already, is that each territory is unique. Each territory has its own idiosyncratic circumstances, like whether it's fuel related or weather related. It's so different. And I love speaking with people like at this point in time throughout Europe. And for you, when you wake up wherever you live, it's like your weather is very like you expect it to happen. But for like I was before the talk, I was talking to Karen, and sort of 2 weeks ago you had snow, and now you're expecting 26 degrees Celsius. I think that's the main takeaway. Is like if you want to do fire weather science well, you really need to look at this super local context. Yeah, that's I think my main learning, and I hope to sort of develop our system further so that everybody in the world can get this localized perspective on fire weather.
Thanks, Daan. If anyone else has questions, feel free to either unmute or throw them in the chat. I have a question more from the processing side of your tool. So what kind of computational power is required, like behind the scenes and under the hood, to run this? Are we talking just series of like networks, or are you running this on like a supercomputer, or
No,
are you willing to share?
I think we're like computational resource wise really efficient. Like I don't know if it says you something, but our infrastructure bill is well currently it's free because we're being sponsored by this cloud hosting company, but we have like 400 or 500 euros a month. That's sort of the computation. You have to express it in euros. That's how much this takes. So it's just a matter of a caching. So we don't have all this data in there. For example, Era 5 by itself is 2.5 petabytes. So like we don't have that ourselves. We just know which parts customers are going to be asking for, and we cache those parts smartly. And then we do have, I think we are quite advanced in sort of the live calculations that we make. So when you ask for the dry wind index for a fire that took place in 2010, we do make those calculations live, but it's very efficient. So it's compared to like we won't have to be building data centers anytime soon.
It makes me think that maybe the European countries are really good at keeping consistent locations for data. I know something that I've run into here is, the data sets may be hosted online, but the URL changes, and then all of a sudden the programming is broken.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Do you encounter that much, or been pretty lucky to?
All the time. Yeah.
And so how as a company do you handle that? Do you get like alerted and flagged? Do you have to wait for one of your customers to alert you, or?
Yeah, it doesn't happen too much for the critical parts. So for example, almost all of the numerical weather models we hadn't had that with those, because I know those are super huge projects, and so they don't change very quickly. For example, for the weather observation stations, because we combine them from many different sources, there we have it all the time, and that sucks. And then sometimes, yeah, you click on a weather station and you say, "Oh, sorry, this data is not available right now," and that's an issue. But it usually takes us like a couple of hours to fix that.
Nice. Yeah, I know my local weather station got renamed And that threw me for a loop for a while. I would try to navigate to see the forecast for my area, and it was like, this station does not exist, but they just renamed it. So if anyone else has any questions, we'll give it a couple minutes to put it in the chat. If we don't have any more questions coming in, we might end a little bit early and give people back a little bit of time in their Friday. I know it's in the evening for Dan over in the Netherlands, so we won't keep him any later than we need to. But Dan, did you have, while we wait, did you have any comments or questions that you would like to ask while we're closing out?
No, I don't think so. Like my closing comment would just be like, I'm always very curious to learn more about the Canadian context, just as an educational space for me. So if there are people who are willing to, just connect and interact, and sort of maybe they are doing work in adjacent fields, I would really appreciate that and see if we can, learn from each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment. And I see some names on this call who I think would be great people, and I hope that they do reach out. Particularly, I see some from Ontario, BC, Alberta, and WT, for example. So hopefully some connections can be formed and some ideas can be shared, even if it's at just a sharing point. I'm seeing, or can you provide a link to your platform? One last question in there.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, that's our website, and there you can just schedule a live demo with me. That's sort of the way to get to the platform right now. We are working on a version where you can just, you can skip me and create a environment for yourself completely automatically. But at this stage, I need to sort of do a couple of things manually before I can set you up with an environment.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you rescheduling with us and helping us wrap up February Flare-Up Fire Intelligence. I think there'll be some interest in the tools that you have, and hopefully some relationships and collaboration opportunities come out of this presentation.
And I really appreciate it being able to speak with you.
Thank you, Dan. I hope that your fire season is safe and productive.
Yeah, nice. So hoping to hear from a number of you, and have a great Friday.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And just for our participants that are still here, we will have another Canada Wildfire webinar next week. You can head to our website, canadawildfire.org/webinars and courses to find out more. Thank you again, and see you all next Friday. Bye-bye.